Gather round, dear friends, as I regale you with a tale of love, jealousy, and the unexpected twist that unraveled the bonds between a young couple and a meddlesome mother-in-law. Susan had an annoying voice, ugly dyed hair, and the most disgusting habit of calling her daughter-in-law Sweetie. And it wasn't because the girl's name was something that could be turned into Sweetie. By Sweetie, she meant something completely different, repulsive and unpleasant, something that people would be ashamed to say out loud. But she had to show her attitude towards this scoundrel. Emily didn't understand what she had done to deserve such treatment. She and Jack lived like any normal young couple. They had met purely by chance, while waiting in line at a bus station. They were headed in different directions, but they exchanged phone numbers because they liked each other so much. Then, there were almost 2 more years of dates in any weather conditions, and as the natural culmination of their relationship, a wedding. It was this wedding that stuck in Susan's throat, Jack's mother. She didn't mind her grown son dating someone, but why live together? And why formalize the relationship for that matter? These days, there are plenty of people who don't get married or have kids until they're almost retired, instead of all this fuss with white dresses and gold rings. "I don't understand why he voluntarily got into this yoke," the respectable lady would grumble to her son, not shy about Emily's presence. "You could just keep dating. But no, she's got you hooked, pressured you, made you." Emily tried to pretend that everything the old shrew said had nothing to do with her. She didn't want to ruin her relationship with her beloved just because his own mother was jealous of his young wife. Susan was already quite old, well into her 60s, because she had Jack when she was almost 40, just for herself. Sometimes the young woman was tempted to ask if Jack growing up without a father was the result of some guy not wanting to tie the knot. But for obvious reasons, the girl kept quiet like a partisan. The problem started almost from the day the newlyweds moved into their rented apartment after the wedding. The brand-new mother-in-law insisted that Emily and Jack live with her in her 2-bedroom apartment, so to speak, under her watchful eye. But the young wife firmly refused such happiness, and Jack had no choice but to follow her to the rental. The one thing his mother could get her way on was the location of the apartment. They were now almost neighbors, just a couple of blocks away from Susan. But Emily had to come to terms with this, so as not to start her married life with a huge scandal. So the elderly woman would come over every day like she was going to work, constantly criticizing and criticizing. Emily didn't cook her son good enough food, the mac and cheese wasn't creamy enough, and the chicken nuggets weren't crispy enough apparently. On top of the cooking woes, Emily wasn't exactly Martha Stewart. She didn't bother ironing the sheets. Who even irons sheets anymore? And the new washing machine seemed to confuse her. And as for Emily's cleaning, there was nothing good to be said. So Emily felt that sooner or later, she would have to start putting these visits in order and separate the Siamese twins of mother and son. But each time, the young woman put these brilliant and ambitious plans off until later. Jack and Emily weren't planning on having kids yet, so there was no need for them to start a family so soon. They lived like everyone else, quietly working, saving money, having fun and relaxing in their free time, and enjoying each other's company. When Jack was offered a job working 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, the young couple was overjoyed. Of course, it was hard for them to imagine only seeing each other at such intervals, but the young family's savings would grow rapidly. It was this financial factor that became the deciding one. It was because of this that Jack agreed. At first, this work schedule was difficult for both newlyweds. They missed each other terribly, but then they got used to it, and they even started to like spending every 3 weeks together after Jack's shift. The only one who couldn't get used to her son's new work schedule was Susan. She tormented her daughter-in-law with constant suspicions that she was being unfaithful to her son while he was away. Sometimes she would come over unannounced and sit in the apartment, keeping an eye on her daughter-in-law's honor. Sometimes she would stake out the building entrance. Sometimes she would question the neighbors about whether Emily had brought any men home. The saddest part was that this attitude gradually rubbed off on Jack. He too started jokingly, or even seriously, asking his wife if she had found a replacement for him during those 3 weeks, if she was fooling around with someone else. At first, Emily just brushed it off. Then she got indignant. And then she just gave up and waved her hand dismissively. She understood that Jack wasn't asking these questions himself. It was his mother egging him on. Jack's next departure for his shift was marked by his wife's anxious questions about whether she was planning to bring a lover over as soon as her lawful husband walked out the door. Even the usually patient wife flared up and showed Jack just how sick of this topic she was. In response, her husband just gave her a conciliatory kiss on the cheek and ran off to his truck. He had a long road ahead of him. 2 days passed perfectly, but on the third day, Emily found her mother-in-law in her apartment. She had come while Emily was at work and refused to leave. "What if you bring your lover here now?" "No way, sweetie. I'm staying put and not moving an inch." Living with Susan was not part of Emily's plans. So through a combination of harsh words and pleading, she managed to see her mother-in-law out. True, Jack was outraged on the phone that Emily had kicked his mother out, but those were just details. Emily felt she was in the right. Emily categorically forbade Susan from setting foot in her home again, and promised that if anything happened, she would call the police without hesitation. The suspicious mother-in-law had to settle for prowling around outside the entrance, questioning the old ladies on the benches and peering in the windows. She was no longer welcome at her daughter-in-law's. Of course, Emily realized that the situation would be presented to Jack in a completely different light. His mother would surely tell him tales of his wicked wife and her own innocence. But her anger at the relentless Susan didn't even let Emily begin a dialogue with her mother-in-law. No, let everything stay as it was. Emily would remember that day, if not forever, then for a long time, for sure. It had been almost a week since she had last seen or heard from her spiteful mother-in-law. What a relief. Moreover, Emily now had someone to come home to, someone to hurry to after work, someone to take care of and love. True, Jack would be back soon, but he would undoubtedly understand and agree too. There was no other way. Emily walked into the apartment and started her usual daily routine. She unpacked the grocery bags, took a shower, and put soup on the stove. The scrape of a key in the lock was news to her. Could Susan have come to lecture her again? Emily froze in the hallway, ready to meet her mother-in-law with an angry rebuke. But instead, Jack unexpectedly appeared in the doorway. "Where is he? Where are you hiding him? You're cheating on me?" Her husband advanced on Emily threateningly, fists clenched and eyes blazing. "Well, look at you, you cheating tramp!" Emily thought Jack was going to hit her. He seemed so outraged by the light robe she had thrown on after her shower. And there in the doorway, her mother-in-law smirked cunningly at her. "The neighbor wouldn't lie, Jackie. She says she can hear Emily perfectly through the shared balcony. Vance this, Vance that. Eat up, my good Vance." "She's definitely hiding someone." I welcomed a snake into my bosom. Jack rushed into the bedroom, and Emily was dumbfounded at what this man she called her beloved husband was doing. The young woman ran after her spouse, but both Jack and Susan, who hadn't even taken their shoes off as they barged into the apartment, stood frozen in the doorway like pillars of salt. Because the Vance Emily had been sweet-talking, and that the neighbor had overheard and promptly reported to his mother, Jack saw him with his own eyes. And it wasn't some hunky 2-meter-tall muscle man. On the armchair, huddled against a cushion, was a tiny striped kitten. The little cat had been scared by the strangers, and now looked warily at the man's contorted, angry face. Emily had found this poor creature abandoned in the trash 4 days ago, named him Vance, and started caring for him. She had hoped to have him litter-trained by the time Jack returned and surprise her husband. It's okay, my little one," Emily said, picking up the fluffy kitten and petting it. So you're not cheating?" Jack seemed to come back down to earth and now looked like any ordinary man who had desperately missed his wife during their forced separation. "I thought, well, come here." Jack opened his arms for an embrace, but Emily didn't move. "Well, what's wrong, baby?" Jack looked puzzled. Instead of hugging her husband, Emily, under her mother-in-law's piercing gaze, briskly started packing her things. She stuffed clothes into a bag, took Vance under her arm, and headed for the door. "What are you doing?" Jack wailed. "You're leaving because of this cat?" At the doorway, Emily turned back. Not because of the cat, but because of a husband who still hasn't grown out of short pants and learned to think for himself. Let your mommy wait for you after your shifts from now on. Vance won't cheat or bring lovers home. Emily closed the door firmly behind her and strode confidently into her new life.